which is I would love to know how you timestamp your day. I had a lot of questions like this. People asking, how do you get all this done? I am doing just the main basic subjects, and I feel like we can hardly get to everything. Welcome to Our Life Homeschooling. My name is Sherry, Christian, wife to my high school sweetheart Nelson, and thankful mom to 10 incredible kids. I'm the author of the blog and YouTube channel Our Life Homeschooling, where I share homeschooling encouragement for everyday moms. I believe that motherhood is ministry, and homeschooling is simply an extension of parenting. My passion is to cheer on other moms who are at home doing the most important work of all, raising the next generation for the glory of God. Hi, and welcome to the Our Life Homeschooling podcast. This is episode number 68. I am answering all your homeschooling questions. I put a post on YouTube asking you to send me your homeschooling questions. I think I got about 52 of them, so I'm not going to be able to get through all of them, but I tried to highlight some of the ones that several people either liked or commented, yes, please answer this, and also some of the ones that I thought would be easy for me to address. I appreciate you taking the time to send me your questions. I wish I could get to all of them. Sometimes as I'm going through them, I'm reading and I'm thinking, oh, I have something I would really like to say, but I am just one person. I'm a mom just like you. My kids are my priority, my husband, my family. And as much as I would like to take the time to get through all of these, it's just more than one person can do. I am limited in how much I can do just because our family comes first. So I'm going to get to what I can. If I don't answer your question, I'm sorry. I hope you'll ask it again. I try to do these once a month or pretty frequently. I enjoy hearing from you, and it encourages me just to hear other moms that are in the thick of it, just like me. I see some of your comments and it takes me back to places that I have been when we had all younger kids, or I can just relate to so many different things that you say. So thank you for sending in your questions. We're starting our new school year next week. I am excited. I love when we are doing school. I feel like I'm more intentional about getting one-on-one time with them during the school year. And so I'm looking forward to it. I've done a little bit of planning. I wanted to show you guys what I have done. Let's see if you can see this. And maybe I'll just do some B-roll for this as well. But this is what I do every year when I'm starting a new school year. I write each of my kids' names out and grades that they're in. The grades only really matter to know when they're going to graduate, but just a little sketch of each of our kids, the things that I want for them to cover in a year. It's all on one piece of paper, all of my kids on one piece of paper, so it kind of gives me a bird's eye view. And it's just a sketch. When I show you things on my channel about keeping things simple, hopefully by looking at this, you'll be able to see I really do keep things very simple. I write all this out. This is just a guideline for me to know what we're aiming for this year. And then we also spent some time, I took the kids shopping. We went to Walmart. We picked up a whole bunch of spiral notebooks. Usually they're like 79 cents, but this time they were 35 cents each. So I picked up a ton of those. We refreshed our colored pencils, our Sharpie markers, our dry erase markers, just got a whole bunch of new supplies, which is always a great way to start your year. I worked on some of our kids' work boxes. Each of our kids has 3 work boxes, a reading, writing, and math work box, and that's where they keep all of their supplies. So that would include the reading that I assign them, as well as some of the reading that they're doing for fun. And we just try to keep everything limited to those 3 work boxes. And the rest of our subjects, a lot of them we do family style. We'll keep our morning time notebooks in the dresser that's right in our dining room. And then some of the read alouds I do for history or science are just on the bookshelf. But just updating those, I gave some of them new labels. Some of them were all coming off and they couldn't find their labels. So we're about ready to start next week. And our son James said, I can't wait to start school. I love to hear the kids say that. So I think that means it's time to get started. I'm going to go ahead and start with these questions. The first one is someone who left a comment on one of my videos, and I promised that I would address this in the next Q&A. So here goes. Sherry, please make a video all about quiet time. I've been doing it with my kids for years, but my 4.5-year-old twins and my son seem to peter out after 20 minutes. And she goes on to say, please share how you develop this habit in your kids. What sort of reinforcement? Do you habit train with punishments, rewards, motivational speeches? I just don't know how anyone else manages to do this. I also feel incredibly guilty for imprisoning my kids. That's how I see it in my mind, she put in parentheses, for that much time each day, since they are already isolated by being homeschooled. Would love to hear more insights. I desperately need the time to myself and can't get it elsewhere. What are the, quote, rules that you set for that time? Okay, first of all, you should not feel guilty at all for implementing some structure in your day that you desperately need. And if you are approaching homeschooling in the right way, you are not isolating your kids. You're intentionally meeting with other friends, having friends over for play dates, going to the library for story time, going to a park day, going out hiking with friends. So we've always worked to make sure our kids have that kind of environment so they know a lot of other friends who are also homeschooling. None of my kids would describe homeschooling as imprisonment. It's been freedom for us. So I don't know if that's something that you could work on, is just making sure that you are getting that time out with friends and that your kids are active and involved, so that when it comes to one time in the middle of the day when you've already been busy with other activities and they have to sit and be quiet, it's refreshing. That's what quiet time has been for us. When I have little ones, babies and nappers, all of them need this nap time. So that was pretty much how it started. But then as I started having kids who outgrew nap time, I still needed that time alone. So I train them to do quiet time. When you begin to teach your kids quiet time, they're usually transitioning out of naps. So they may still nap maybe 2 times a week, 3 times a week. But then other days they don't nap. And so for this, I would sit right outside my child's bedroom door. So I'm close by. I would bring a book, maybe my planner, my computer, whatever I was working on. But they needed me to be close by so that I could redirect them as much as possible. The rules for us were, you need to stay in your room, maybe more specifically with younger kids in your bed. You can have this amount of toys. So for me, I usually would pick 2 or 3 things that they could have. If you give them unlimited amounts, it just leaves more room for problems and questions. You can pick 2 toys and 1 book, perhaps. And this is what you're going to play with. And it's quiet. And I would start by setting a timer, keep it short, probably 15 to 20 minutes, and you are right there. If they are wanting to constantly talk to you and ask questions, this isn't a time for talking. So you need to express that to them. If they repeatedly are just not listening to what you're saying, they're not doing anything you say, then that becomes a behavior issue, and you need to address that in a way that you feel comfortable as a parent. That becomes more of a discipline issue, and this is going to be a wide spectrum for different parents. If you're looking for more direction on that, I highly recommend the book Dare to Discipline by Dr. Dobson. But whatever consequences you've decided, you need to follow through with those consequences consistently so that the kids know the boundaries. They know that the consequences are going to be the same when they cross them. And then slowly over time, as your child gets used to that time period, I would stretch it out for a little bit longer. They should be able to do quiet time without you sitting right beside them with a timer. Now, as kids get older, my kids who are, I want to say, between 8 and 15, or maybe just teenagers in general, they know that I have my quiet time in my room and they don't interrupt. So for the younger ages, around like my 8-year-old, I'll set a timer and say, I want you to do quiet reading on your own for 20 minutes. When the timer goes off, you are free to be in the living room, to go outside, to do anything as long as you're quiet. And at this stage, he has a lot of older siblings. Everyone understands what quiet time is. So it's not something they're just adjusting to. Now, when my oldest was 8, we probably still had a more formal quiet time where everyone was staying in their rooms, staying on the sofa, wherever that place was for each child, and staying in quiet time. So it's something that changes over the years, but you need that time to yourself so that you can be refreshed to go back out and serve your kids. Next question, how many copywork, narration, and dictations per day or per week? We do copywork every day, and that's as soon as a child can copy a sentence. Usually for my youngest kids, they're doing Bob books. As soon as they can write all their letters, I will have them copy a sentence that I write on their notebook from their Bob books. And then they're doing copy work all the way up until they hit high school level. Sometimes they have a lot of outside classes, and so at some point I let them go with copy work because they have a lot of other writing assignments. But copy work is so beneficial. Narration, I have had my kids doing 2 good narrations per week. This really varies on what other things you're doing. If you feel like your kids need more practice, you can have them do 1 narration every day. But I would say 2 written narrations per week minimum. And then younger kids that are orally narrating, I try to have them narrate at some point every day, just so they're getting into that habit. Next question. I only have 4 kids, and sometimes I feel like there is always at least one kid who is overflowing with opinions and strong emotions. I always wonder how families with 8 to 10 kids do it. How do you manage your kids' emotions in a way that helps them feel loved and supported, but allows you to move forward in schooling and a day? And I had another similar comment. Someone said, I have 4 kids and we struggle with a schedule throughout the day. How to juggle it all. I feel overwhelmed when everyone needs me all at once. Someone commented above and said that she has a child that has big emotions, and I have one like this as well. If you're a parent, I think God gives each of us that one child for whom there is no guidelines or textbook written. We just have to depend on Him and look to Him for wisdom. We've had that. We have some kids that have big emotions, and when they're around, they're just louder, they're more expressive. The volume and the excitement in the room just goes up. We've had this as well. And one rule of thumb that I have tried to remember is I want them to have the freedom to express themselves within limits. We do have rules. We do have times when they just have to be quiet and they can't be as expressive. And I would probably expect them to follow the same rules, but maybe give them more breaks for that child that just needs it. But the rule that's helped me the most is that if you have a child that is very expressive, very emotional, to the point where the rest of your kids cannot learn and they cannot keep up with their studies, all of your attention is going to this one child. This is something that needs to be addressed because you don't want the rest of your kids to suffer because of one child's behavior. And I know this isn't easy. We're just normal parents like you. We have very similar struggles, but just be aware that you are not giving all of your energy and all your attention to this one child who's very disruptive at times, to the detriment of your 3 or 4 other kids that are doing their work neatly, that are doing everything that's required of them. So that's something that I always try to keep in mind. Some things we've done is separating a child, letting them work by themselves for a period of time in a room with a desk or something like that, having them work one-on-one with me, having them sit beside me, sometimes just enlisting my husband, getting ideas from him on what we could do, how we can solve some of the issues that we're having. But just be aware that because one child has big emotions, that you're not forgetting your kids that are listening and working hard, and that they're not getting the short end of the stick because of the challenges that you're having. Several people commented on this question and said, yes, these are great questions. There's a couple questions, so I'm going to try to answer them. How did you teach your kids to take ownership of their learning or personal life? How did you teach your kids to love reading for leisure? How would you homeschool multiple kids? Do you have time dedicated for individual kids in a day? These are a lot of questions. First of all, not all of our kids love to read. I would say most of them love to read. The ones that don't enjoy reading as much seem to really gravitate towards audiobooks. If they enjoy books at all, it would be more of an audiobook. They also will like to read biographies about people. And usually our kids that don't enjoy reading as much are just more mechanical and hands-on or more physical. So anything that you can do, like listening to audiobooks when you're riding in the car or as they're going to bed. Or our one son who's older loves to listen to podcasts, and he's not much of a reader, but he'll listen to theological topics on podcasts because then he can be working while he's also learning. But I would say for the most part, our kids love to read because I've been reading to them since they were born. And it's just a part of our lifestyle. We've been so many places through the books we've read. It just opens up a whole new world to them. So it has come pretty naturally to most of our kids. As far as taking ownership of their work, for the first 5 to 7 years, maybe even longer, my kids didn't really take ownership of their work. It was so much of me laying the groundwork for all that we're doing. But when they hit middle school and high school, they want to do things on their own. So I usually start the year with just asking them, what are your interests? Is there something you really want to learn about? Is there something you want to try? Let's try and make that happen. So the older they get, this comes more naturally. And as far as homeschooling multiple kids, it's the same as having children. You have one and it seems like a lot. And then you have your second and then that seems like a lot. But you get used to it and it becomes your norm. That's similar to homeschooling. We started with one. That was a lot, our kindergarten year. Now the thought of just having one child in kindergarten, to me, I feel like I could just do that in half asleep because we've done other things and that's become easier. But at the time, that was a lot. As we added more, I always tried to get my oldest child reading and writing on their own. So then as soon as they could write on their own, they can do copywork. Copywork teaches them so much. As soon as they're good at that, then we move on and we add narration. These are simple things. And then that gives me a little bit more freedom to work with the next child that's coming up. And this kind of leads into the next question, which is, I would love to know how you timestamp your day. And I had a lot of questions like this. People asking, how do you get all this done? I am doing just the main basic subjects, and I feel like we can hardly get to everything. And I'll just tell you that when our kids were young, I was doing so much more work. I wouldn't have time. It would have been hard for me to have extra time in a day to do something like make a YouTube video or something like that because I was laying the groundwork for everything. It was all foundational investment. Those were investment years. And it just was so much work. So I began by learning some routines that we still keep today, and those have helped. But it just is more work in the early years. As your kids get older, you have different struggles. They're more emotional struggles usually. But that physical work and that beginning is just, that is under your belt. And I just think about how my younger kids have learned as opposed to my older kids. With my older kids, when I taught them to read and write, it seemed like such a long process. And it probably did take them quite a bit longer to learn how to do it. With my younger kids, it is so different because they have so many older siblings who are reading and writing around them all the time. Sometimes when I go to teach my 5-year-old, 4-year-old, sometimes 6, whatever age it is, when I teach them to write, I find that they've already learned how to write so many of their letters just from sitting beside an older sibling. And so I have to make sure that I'm catching it in time before they learn to write some of their letters wrong, or maybe I just want to make sure, they're learning things appropriately. But they pick up on so much more. And so when it comes to our first 5 kids and the first 7 or 8 years of homeschooling, it was a completely different world. It was so much work, and so everything depended on me. I needed my husband's help for a lot more of it. But now the amount of time it takes one of my younger kids to learn to read and write is so much shorter because they have 5 older siblings around them that they are picking up on throughout the day. So that's something maybe that's hard to grasp until you've seen it, but I've seen it with my own kids. It's just something that naturally happens in a bigger family. When you add a child, when you have maybe 4 kids and you add a 5th child, you're adding another child that is completely dependent on you. But you get to a certain stage where your independent kids start outnumbering your dependent kids. And that's when things totally flip. That's when it flipped for me. When I had another baby and I realized that my oldest 2 were so independent, asking if they could do things like, hey, can I make dinner for you? Or, hey, so-and-so's having a birthday. Can I make her birthday cake this year? Things like that, where they start doing some of your work for fun because it's a way for them to be creative and to do it with their own flair or whatever. So in the early years when I would have another child, that just seemed like a lot. And there was a point where my plate felt so full. But every time we had another child hit, 10 or 12, and then now we have 2 graduates, but then we have a 17-year-old, 15, 14, 12, 10. That's 5 kids right there that are asking me if they can do different things that are just really helpful. That's how families that have 8 to 10 kids are able to do that. I know that's another question someone said. You do this with 8 to 10 kids. I only have 4. I'm so overwhelmed. That is how it works. You just have so many more older independent kids. And so your work level, the demands change. How do you find time to explain math to many children at different levels? We have different grades and it takes time to do math with everyone separately. This is something I had to change in the early years. I was doing Right Start math, and that is very teacher intensive. I was doing it with all of our kids. So we were doing individual math lessons up until I had 3 kids in math. And I realized there was no way I could do 3 individual math lessons with 3 kids and still get to everything else we were doing. So at this point, we switched to Singapore math, which is much less teacher intensive. My kids really liked it. They were able to work mostly on their own. I had to just check in with them every day, make sure they understood the concept. As they got to new concepts, which each child isn't coming to a new concept every day, so it can be kind of staggered out. I would stop and work independently with that child. And this just really helped us. So it may be that you need to find something that's less teacher intensive. And then specifically for math, they need to be very strong, automatic in their computation skills. So in addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, they should be able to answer those quickly because they lay the foundation for the next steps, which would be percentages, fractions, and decimals. You have to be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide automatically before you can move on to that next step. So focus on those things. What advice do you have for a mom working from home and thinking about homeschooling? My advice, if you want to homeschool, you should absolutely do it. I don't know what your work from home schedule looks like. I was completely a stay-at-home mom for the first 19 years of our homeschooling. It's only within the past couple years that I've started this YouTube channel. It does bring in a little bit of an income for me. It does require some work from me every week, but it's work that I'm able to fit in before the kids wake up in the morning and then in the afternoon for about an hour and a half. So I'm able to fit it in the margin of our day, and it's just been a really great fit. It's a way for me to hopefully minister to others, encourage other people with some things that I've learned over the years, while also just making some extra income for my family to have lessons or to go on a vacation, some extra things. It's been really nice for that. But so I don't know what your hours are, but you absolutely can homeschool if you want to do it. I recommend reading Nikki Truesdell's book, Anyone Can Homeschool. She tells the story of her mom, who was a single mom, so she had to work all day, and she homeschooled her kids in the evening. It's really inspiring. It gives a lot of practical tips, so I would start there. Have you had your kids work for someone as young as 13 or 14 from someone to learn a skill? Maybe not paid work, but being able to be around someone old and experienced who can pass down real life knowledge. I'm curious for my son who would like to try something like that once he reaches that age. Yes, we have. Actually, my 13-year-old and 15-year-old daughters this summer have been working at a local farm. They needed just some extra help around there. It is a paid position, but they've loved it. It's like 4 or 5 hours in a morning, about 3 mornings a week. It has been perfect. It gives them just enough to do. Then they come home and they have some free time. And then we did the same thing. Some of our older 2 boys were able to get jobs at a place that hired at 14. And at that age, they just wanted to be busy. They wanted to be out doing things. It was a great fit for them. If your child wants to do that, I would try to find something. And it can be paid, or like you mentioned, it could just be with another adult learning a skill. I think that's great. It's great for them to learn from other adults that you respect. As someone not yet homeschooling but plans to, what books would you recommend I read to prepare? Also, I've heard mixed reviews on when to start homeschooling formally. Do you start at a certain age, or is it more on their readiness and ability? The book that was most beneficial for me was by Susan Schaefer McCulley, For the Children's Sake. I highly recommend it. It was very inspiring. It was the book that won me over to homeschooling. And there are so many others I could probably list. I should write a blog post on my favorite homeschooling books. I feel like I need to get caught up on some of the current ones. I just interviewed Jennifer Pepito. She's going to be on here in a couple weeks. And her newest book, The Inspired Homeschool, is so good. So this list, I feel like there are more that I could add to it, but the one I mentioned is one that was really influential for me. You begin teaching your children from the time they're born. And, as they're growing, even as babies, you're reading books to them. Toddlers, you're still reading to them. I was always reading to my toddlers before they would go down for nap time. Every day, that was a part of our life. And then in the evening, we would usually sing a song, either just a little Bible song or a hymn. I was teaching them a hymn when they were little, just as part of our routine. We were starting to learn how to do chores. Just give them, when they're 3 years old, I would have my kids make your bed, brush your teeth, and get dressed. That was the 3-year-old's job for the morning. So you're just starting some of those routines. Now, as far as formal academic work, my recommendation for this is that you start when they show signs of readiness. And I did a blog post on this, how to know when your child is ready to start reading. And in there, I list a whole bunch more than I can just think off the top of my head of how to know when they're ready. But specifically, when you see them noticing letters, pretending to read on their own, trying to sound out signs, or when you're on the road, maybe they think they know what this sign says. When they start noticing letters and words, if they ask you, maybe they'll just ask you, can I start learning to read? This is when you start opening the books and teaching them how to read and write. And that's what comes first. Math is important as well. They learn so much math just from being with you, from counting, watching you count money, playing games with them. So many games involve counting. But we usually start with reading and just understanding basic letters. And I do it when my kids start asking. So I can't give you an age and a time for that, because that's going to be different for each child. Some kids are interested earlier and they want to get going. And so don't wait. But some kids are just not ready. They're playing, they're off doing their own thing. And if you try to sit down and start formal lessons with them, you are going to be beating a dead horse, because they're just not developmentally ready for it yet. So I look for signs of readiness, and that's when I start giving them a little more of a challenge. Do you have older kids read some books from Ambleside Online beyond year 6? If so, which books? I do. Usually as our kids get into middle school and high school, they're taking more classes from a local co-op. So this changes a little. I don't follow Ambleside Online as closely in the upper years. Usually I use those top years, 7 through 12, I use their free reading lists, and we'll pick books from there to add to our kids' list of books that they want to try reading for the year. And it's just a lot of classics like Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre. I'm trying to think of some boy books, but right now I have 3 teenage girls. But we'll just use a lot of those classic literature books that they recommend. Also, they have some original speeches, and I do like our kids to be familiar with those. So I'll have them listen to those or read those. So those are the ones that we usually work on. Let me get back to the question of the person who asked how I time stamp my day. I'm usually up between 6 and 6:30, although this has really changed from when I had an infant. So I'm in a completely different stage now. I have a 3-year-old as my youngest, and he sleeps in. So I'm usually up at 6 or 6:30. I go walking in the morning. I have older kids who are here, so I have freedom to do that. And then I spend some time alone reading my Bible. I do some online work. That's when I fit it in before the kids get up. And then the kids start getting up usually around 7:30, and I do expect everyone to be ready to go with morning time at 8:30. That's our time that we get going. So we'll do morning time, and that takes a different amount of time. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 45 minutes, and then we'll move right on into chores. Chores takes usually about a half an hour. After that, the kids get out their checklists, they do their independent work, and during this time, I am working one-on-one with my budding reader, whoever that is, whoever's learning to read and write and the basics of math, we're getting those lessons done. And usually there's a child that's just ahead of them that also needs a little more one-on-one time with me. My little ones will need direction sometimes during this time. So I'm just going back and forth between each of the kids. I'm checking in with my older ones if someone's coming to a new math concept. It is a bit of a juggle this time from about 10 to 12 where they're doing their independent work. But, we've just made it work over the years. And then around noon, we stop for lunch and going outside. Now, if it's nice out, we are often doing our work out on the deck or on the front porch because I love to be outside. I want the kids outside. But we'll stop for a simple lunch. One advantage I have with older kids, I have some older kids who asked me this summer, can you have us all assigned to make meals, like a breakfast, lunch, and a dinner once a week? So I couldn't believe they asked me this, but I was overwhelmed one day and I was just saying, I feel like I have all these things to do and I have to make dinner yet. And my one daughter said, Mom, so-and-so has her kids making a breakfast, lunch, and a dinner every week. You should do that. And all the kids were like, oh, we would love to do that. So we did that this summer and it was awesome. My kids loved the day that they had to make their lunch meal, for example. They would just get all creative and get these different things out. Now, it's only my older kids who are doing this. So if a younger kid was doing this, it would be overwhelming. They get everything out. They wouldn't put it back. But that's just a freedom that you have the more older kids you have. So we'll break for lunch and going outside, and then usually around 1:30 or 2, I gather my kids back again together and we'll read aloud. We read aloud anywhere from a half an hour, sometimes an hour, depending on how much I read, and then we'll break for quiet time. I usually set a timer for some of our kids to read quietly for about 20 minutes, and then after that they can do their quiet time however they want, as long as they're quiet. My younger kids need to go to their rooms for quiet time. And so this would be my 5-year-old and my 3-year-old. Sometimes my 5-year-old is able to stay up depending on how she's doing, because I have older girls who also just she'll go up to their room and hang out with them or things like that. So that is basically a timestamp of our day. Back to the Ambleside Online question. How many books do you read during your read aloud time? From my understanding, Ambleside Online divides the books into weekly chapters scheduled. Do you still follow this, or do you just stick with one and read it daily until you finish? This is a good question. I did follow Ambleside Online pretty closely for the first several kids. With my oldest child, I did every book, which was way too many. But that's how I learned which books I liked and which ones I want to use. So I followed it pretty closely with my older kids until I think I had 3 kids in 3 different years, and I realized I just couldn't do this. So what I did instead was I went through years 0 through 6 and wrote a list of the books that I absolutely loved, wanted to make sure all of our kids were familiar with. And I have that list in a blog post, the Ambleside Online books that we love. I'll try to remember to link that in the description box if you'd like to look at it. If you haven't seen it, I have all the books that I aim for. So when I start school next week and I start making the kids' checklists, I'll sit down with them, I'll open up this blog post, I'll look at what they did last year, and I'll ask, okay, which of these books haven't you read yet? Which do we need to work on this year? And so we'll list a couple of those that child is going to work towards. Some of the Ambleside Online books are challenging, and I know my kids will benefit more if I read them aloud. So sometimes I'll pick 3 or 4 Ambleside Online books a year that I'm going to use in our read aloud time so that the kids can just, get a better understanding of it. But other than that, I'll put it on their list as a book that they need to get to. So I've become looser and looser with this the more kids we've had, but I still feel like they're getting a really high quality of literature because maybe they're not reading everything, but the books they are reading are very good. They're quality, and I know that they're getting all the ones that really mattered to me. And then we're also, as part of our morning time, we're still doing composer study, artist study, folk songs, hymn study, memory work, all those things that aren't specifically in the year 1 book list or year 2 book list or whatever. So no, I don't follow their schedule strictly right now. I did, however, for a period of time. So it just depends on where you are with your kids. I hope this has been helpful. If I didn't get to your question, please feel free to ask your question again in the next Q&A. I appreciate hearing from you. I hope this encourages you and helps you. When I hear some of the questions you have, I try to think myself of when I was in that situation and how I handled it. Or if I haven't had that happen, I try to think, what would I do if I was in the same circumstance? But it is a little bit of a guessing game because I don't know all the specifics. And so I may give an answer that if I actually was with you and saw exactly what you're talking about, maybe I would give a different answer. It is a little bit of a guessing game, but hopefully it's been practical and helpful for you. If you could take just a moment to leave a review, if you enjoy this podcast, it would be so helpful. It helps get the word out to other families about this resource. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on the Our Life Homeschooling podcast.